The first tremor wasn't a scream or a crash, but a whisper, a subtle shift in the air, a drop in the temperature of my carefully constructed world. My name is Clara, and I was 18, 8 months into a relationship with Leo that felt like the beginning of forever. We were the storybook couple, a little sappy, maybe, but utterly devoted, or so I thought. Everything was great until recently, around August, when I moved 3 hours away for college. Leo was my Leo, the guy who was super innocent, never had his first kiss or anything before me, never really talked to women, never followed women besides family till me. That innocence, that unworldliness, was part of his charm. It made me feel safe, special, chosen. Our perfect bubble started to stretch and thin around August. I packed my life into a minivan and moved 3 hours away for college. Chemistry major, a demanding, soul-crushing path of perpetual late nights and molecular structures that danced behind my eyes. I have been prioritizing schoolwork, and it is a lot. Leo was supposed to be there with me. We had planned it for months. A tiny apartment, shared textbooks, and the adventure of starting our adult lives side by side. That was the dream. The reality, BF was supposed to join me, but he fucked off and blew his college savings and didn't apply for loans or housing in time, so he didn't get to come this semester. It was the first crack in the foundation, a monumental failure of responsibility that made the codependent label I'd already given him suddenly feel heavier, darker. Long distance was fine at first, but he quickly became very needy, and I get it. He misses me, and he's a pretty codependent person. The codependency I mentioned, it metastasized. Leo, suddenly alone in our hometown with a dead-end job and the ghost of a shared future, became a bottomless pit of need. I get it. I really do. He misses me. But I was drowning in organic chemistry and advanced calculus. The issue was, I have been prioritizing schoolwork, and he gets upset about it when I can't text or call all the time. The little passive-aggressive comments would start. Must be nice to have so much time for everything but me. I guess a chemistry major is more important than your actual boyfriend. It was emotional drainage, a relentless tiny drip of guilt added to the already overflowing cup of academic stress. Then, about 2 weeks ago, the neediness strangely evaporated. The constant pings and demands for attention vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence. He became a bit distant a couple weeks ago. I tried to convince myself it was a good thing. I chalked it off to football season starting, so he has something to entertain him now. I breathed a sigh of relief. A needy boyfriend was exhausting, but a distant one was suspicious. I chose the relief, shutting down the suspicion with the mental image of him glued to the TV, beer in hand, yelling at the screen. That felt safe. Predictable. The true alarm bell, the one that jolted me awake, didn't ring, it pinged. And it happened on a Friday afternoon, a perfect storm of procrastination and digital archaeology. I was supposed to be studying the mechanism of a chemical reaction, but instead I was lost in the dusty, neglected corners of the internet. Well, recently, I was looking through his old Instagram accounts following for an old HS teacher's account. A woman named Mrs. Hawthorne, a quirky English teacher we both loved. I remembered Leo had followed her. So I dug up his old Instagram account, the one he hadn't used in months, maybe even a year. The one that was a digital fossil, a snapshot of his pre-Clara life. I clicked on his following list. In his following, at the top, an account stood out to me, like a freshly planted flag on ancient territory. I spent the next 20 minutes being a detective, a stalker, a terrible girlfriend, whatever label you want to stick on it. Doing a bit of stalking, I realized it was a girl from his work. Now, this shouldn't have been weird, right? But with Leo, Everything was weird. His digital life was as sparse as a desert, yet here he was following only her from his entire workplace. Not too weird, besides the fact he only follows her from work and nobody else. None of the guys he always talks about, just her. That was the first anomaly. But also, this is his old account. The second, and far more critical, was the account itself. This was his old account. He doesn't use this one anymore, so why follow her on that one, but not his newest one? It was a calculated, deliberate act of compartmentalization, a secret digital handshake that bypassed my peripheral vision. It wasn't just a follow, it was a secret. The paranoia started to feel less like paranoia and more like intuition. It clicked into place with another recent, bizarre incident. Another weird thing is he sent me a video from his old account too, then said he didn't mean to and didn't even realize he was on that account. He never uses it anymore, so why was he actively on it? A complete dismissal. He was trying to cover his tracks, but the tracks were leading to a small, brightly lit profile picture. I confronted him later that evening, trying to keep my voice light, my tone casual, but the words felt like lead on my tongue. I asked him, and he was dismissive, saying she was just a friend from work, and he's trying to set her up with one of his other friends, yet she doesn't follow his friend, and his friend doesn't follow her. It was a flimsy lie, a silk curtain over a brick wall. And since when did Leo, the guy who couldn't flirt with a lamppost, become a matchmaker? I decided to drop it. That's what I told myself. I dropped it. But really, I just shelved it, labeling the file Anomaly, Emma, Work. I was too tired to fight. I decided to drop it. But the file wasn't closed. It was just gathering digital dust before the next piece of evidence landed on top of it. The next confrontation wasn't about Emma or the ghost account, it was about me. We recently got into a fight, a stupid, unnecessary one, something about me missing a call because I was in the library. And just like that, the script flipped, the spotlight blindingly redirected. He instantly goes to how he's so worried I'm cheating because I'm up here in college around new dudes. It was a punch to the gut, accusatory, loud, and completely baseless. His sudden, aggressive suspicion was so out of left field, so disproportionate to the actual situation that it hung in the air like a siren. Why is he being so accusatory with no reason to be suspicious? The answer, the one the detective in my head screamed, was painful and obvious. Projection, the classic maneuver of a guilty mind. He was worried I was cheating because he was doing something he considered cheating. I didn't let him off the hook easily that time. He backtracked, of course, the emotional momentum spent. I'm just scared to lose you, Clara. That's all. I'm scared and I miss you. The usual line, but this time it sounded hollow, brittle, like a mask about to shatter. Then came yesterday, the actual, indisputable, physical evidence. Then yesterday, he was up here to visit and I was on his Apple Music finding songs to play when I scrolled onto his Shared With Me. A whirlwind 48 hours of forced intimacy and the heavy pressure of making it work. Usually his best friend is only on there because they share albums back and forth. Mark, his best friend, was the only one. But this time, this girl, we'll call her Emma, is there. It was a flood of recent activity, a steady stream of EPs and curated playlists. It's showing me music Emma has been sharing with him and only one album his friend shared that he shared over a month ago. Music Emma had been sharing with him, and only her. It wasn't just a list, it was a digital timeline of a secret, sustained interaction. The shared music was a sound bridge between their two lives, a continuous conversation that went beyond the casual acquaintance of a coworker. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. I stared at the screen, the names swimming before my eyes. Emma, shared with you. I asked him about it, holding out the phone, my hand shaking slightly. Leo, who is this? He looked over, and the instantaneous flush of color that flooded his face was all the confirmation I needed. The casual defensiveness was gone, replaced by pure, cornered animal panic. He takes his phone too quickly, too aggressively. He says everyone at work shared music with each other and gets defensive, saying it's not only her, yet she's the only one who's shared with him since his friend shared something over a month ago. Bullshit, Leo. Why is she the only one sharing with you then? Mark hasn't shared anything in a month. He got defensive, raising his voice, which was always his sign of losing the argument. He was frantic, his eyes darting around the room looking for an escape hatch. I was calm now. Terrifyingly so. The shock had burned away, leaving a cold, hard clarity. Leo, look at the screen. She is the only one who has shared anything with you since Mark shared that album over a month ago. Tell me the truth. Why are you lying to me? He couldn't meet my eyes. He just clutched the phone, muttering something incoherent about getting a drink. He then takes his phone with him this time when he goes into the store really quick instead of leaving it like he usually does. And then, the final, undeniable proof that I was no longer dealing with the innocent, sweet Leo I thought I knew. He took his phone. He took his secret. I sat there, staring at the closed door, the silence of the room deafening. Should I be worried? I could never imagine him cheating on me. He can barely talk to women, I thought. He is constantly talking about how he's so scared to lose me. The idea of him, this sheltered, seemingly fragile man, capable of such a cold, calculated betrayal, the ghost Instagram, the coordinated lies, the sudden defensiveness, the shared music, it felt like a character in a movie, not my Leo. But the evidence, it was an undeniable escalating stack of anomalies. I also don't have time to be played. My chemistry major required my full attention. My life was too important to be derailed by a mediocre man's mediocre lies. The question was no longer if he was hiding something, but what and why. And the most terrifying thought of all, if he was capable of this level of deception, what else was he hiding? The detective in me was officially awake, and she was cold, calculating, and absolutely furious. The game had changed. I wasn't just a girlfriend anymore. I was an investigator, and the first piece of the puzzle, Emma, was just the beginning of a much larger, darker picture. The door clicked open as he came back, phone still aggressively held in his pocket. He smiled, a small, strained, apologetic smile, and held up a plastic bag with a Gatorade. Sorry, babe, long line. I smiled back, a fake, brittle smile that didn't reach my eyes. No problem, Leo. Inside, I was already dialing a number. Not Mark's, not a friend's. A number I hadn't used since I left town. The number for the shadow. The anonymous private investigator my wealthy, highly suspicious Aunt Vivian kept on retainer. I needed a professional. I needed the truth, and I needed it fast. The innocent boy I loved was gone. A stranger was standing in his place, and I needed to know his name. The investigation had just begun.
The immediate aftermath of dialing Silas, Aunt Vivian's investigator, was a terrifying clarity. The air in the tiny dorm room seemed to solidify around me, heavy with the weight of my decision. I was no longer the heartbroken girlfriend. I was a chemist, an investigator, and a moral boundary crosser. I had initiated a professional surveillance operation, but the need for immediate, undeniable data, the cold, hard truth, was a molecular imperative. I couldn't wait 2 days for grainy photos. I was a student of immediate reactions. Leo was downstairs, likely trying to stretch his 10-minute quick trip to the store into a half-hour of nervous scrolling through his phone, deleting messages, sanitizing his digital life. He was buying time, but I was synthesizing it. I canceled Silas's physical surveillance. Hold phase 1, Silas. I have a faster route to the initial data point. Stand by for potential phase 2, asset tracking. Understood, Miss Clark. His voice was a dry rattle over the phone. Just remember, shortcuts in evidence collection often complicate the prosecution. Prosecution. The word echoed, chilling me. I wasn't thinking about court. I was thinking about closure, about surviving finals week without the crushing psychological burden of uncertainty. The idea for the Veritas hit me with the force of a breakthrough in the lab. A truth serum. Not the crude cinematic knockout drops, but a precise psychoactive compound. My mind, trained in organic chemistry, raced through pathways of inhibition, suggestibility, and neurotransmitter response. I wasn't aiming for paralysis, but for unburdening. I needed to chemically dismantle the protective structure of his lies. I needed something that would, 1, dampen his internal anxiety, the fear of consequence that fueled his lying. 2, provide a mild euphoria and wakefulness to encourage rambling and detailed speech. And 3, metabolize cleanly, leaving no trace. The beauty of chemistry, I realized, was that it was amoral. The molecules didn't care about betrayal or trust. They only cared about reaction kinetics. My 2-day preparation was a blur of calculated risks. I lied to my roommate Sarah about needing specialty items for a hyper-specific enzyme wash, a complex biological process. Sarah, bless her poli-sci heart, just rolled her eyes and said, "If you blow up the microfridge, Clara, I'm blaming your volatile acids." I couldn't synthesize pharmaceutical-grade substances. I worked with extraction and concentration. The sedative component came from carefully isolated and concentrated alkaloids found in a specific health supplement I bought in bulk, a mild muscle relaxant that, when processed, became a potent inhibitor of the central nervous system's stress response. It took painstaking filtration and solvent washes in the makeshift laboratory of my dorm bathroom, the scent of industrial-grade ethanol masked by 3 layers of air fresheners. The stimulant was an extraction from rare tea leaves combined with a precise measure of an over-the-counter amino acid used for focus, the cocktail designed to flood his system with talkative, anxious energy, but without the physical ability to panic and clam up. The final product was a 2-milliliter vial of Veritas, clear, odorless, and faintly sweet. I sealed it with wax and hid it inside an empty perfume atomizer box. I had become something I barely recognized, a cold, calculating operator willing to violate my ethical code for the sake of survival. Leo's planned visit, the one I had sprung on him to stop his agonizing neediness, was now the stage for the final act. I told him I was cooking his favorite pasta, linguine with clams, a dish that always reminded him of our first date. The aroma of garlic, wine, and basil was the perfect smokescreen for the slight, almost metallic scent of the ethanol I had used in the final rinse of my glassware. He arrived Friday, looking exhausted but desperately happy. He held me tightly, his guilt manifesting as crushing affection. "God, Clara, I needed this. I almost couldn't handle this week. It was so hard without you." "Hard without Emma," I silently corrected him. I led him to the small table. I mixed us a drink, a celebratory cocktail. I call it Clara's Cure. It's blue curacao, your favorite kind of terrible. He laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "You know me too well." I poured the drinks with surgical precision of a lab technician. The base was a strong, sweet blue curacao, the color and flavor intense enough to overwhelm any sensory anomalies.
I turned my back to the counter, my hand steady as I uncorked the Veritas vial. 2 milliliters. I watched the clear liquid dissolve instantly into the blue syrup in his glass. No change in color, no sedimentation, chemically perfect. I stirred it gently, then turned, offering the glasses. Mine was clean. His was poisoned. I said, "To us," my voice perfectly level, meeting his eye. He echoed, "To us," taking a huge celebratory gulp. He grimaced slightly at the sweetness, but drank deeply. We ate. I watched him like a hawk studying its prey. For the first 20 minutes, nothing. Just Leo, eating pasta, talking about a terrible shift, complaining about the manager. Then the shift. Subtle, insidious. He finished his food and his eyes got a little too wide, a little too bright. He started talking faster, his hands moving erratically. The anxiety was dissolving, replaced by an unnerving, high-energy garrulousness.
And Ethan was being such an idiot about the inventory, Clara. I had to recount the entire shipment of oat milk. And Emma, she was just standing there, shaking her head, and she said, "Leo, you deserve a medal just for putting up with this kindergarten operation." She sees me, Clara. She really sees me. Emma. The name was no longer a secret. It was a compulsion. This was my moment. I leaned in, radiating false warmth. "She sounds like a great friend, Leo. You know, I was looking through your old Instagram the other day, looking for Mrs. Hawthorne, you know, and I saw you followed Emma on that one. That was a funny coincidence." I kept the tone light, making it sound like a harmless observation. He didn't tense up. The Veritas had stripped the reflexive defensiveness. "Oh, that old thing? Yeah, that's our joke, Clara." He slurred slightly, but his eyes were wide awake. "She said my main account was too established, too much like yours. But the old one, the one I used when I was depressed after my dad left, she said that was the real me, the deep one. I only followed her there so my friends wouldn't ask questions. She said you wouldn't notice because you're too busy being brilliant." Too busy being brilliant. A resentful sneer hidden in a compliment. I pressed on. "And the music, Leo. I saw her name on Apple Music, Leo. You know I saw it. You got so upset." I pushed the accusation gently, watching for a relapse of denial. He just shrugged, almost merrily. "Upset? Yeah, because you always jump to conclusions. But it is her. We have this whole thing. She sends me playlists for when I'm feeling trapped. I send her stuff for when she's mad at her ex. We are sharing albums back and forth all the time. Our secret soundtrack. It's not cheating, Clara. It's connection." Connection. He was using the word that should define us to define them. I poured him another small glass, purely blue curacao this time, to maintain the state without increasing the dosage. "And the accusation, Leo. You snapped at me about cheating. Why? When did you start worrying so much about what I was doing?" His eyes clouded over slightly, a brief flicker of shame. "It was after the first time with Emma. We were closing up. She had this tiny smudge of mocha on her cheek, and I reached out and wiped it with my thumb. She looked at me and she said, 'You're too handsome to be scrubbing floors, Leo.' And I couldn't help it. I kissed her. It was fast, a terrible, wonderful, stupid mistake.
He stopped, momentarily breathless, the adrenaline spike of the stimulant catching up. So I was trying to figure out how to tell you, but I couldn't. And then I started thinking about you 3 hours away, meeting all these smart, focused guys. I thought if I kissed Emma, you must be doing something worse. That's what Emma said too. She said, Leo, you're just projecting your own desires. You're worried about her leaving because you already want to leave. I wasn't worried about you cheating, Clara. I was worried about me being the only one who was cheating. Projection confessed. It was all there. The digital secret, the emotional intimacy, the physical betrayal, the classic psychological defense mechanism. The Veritas was a flawless reagent, yielding 100% confession. I needed the final brutal truth. She pulled back, didn't she, Leo? She wants you to be free, to untangle yourself. Why hasn't anything else happened?
He nodded sadly, suddenly looking like the sad, confused boy I remembered. She said she doesn't do complicated. She said, you need to cut the cord with Clara, Leo. I like you, but I won't be the side piece. She made me realize you're the safety net. You're the responsibility. She's the challenge. The person I could have been if I hadn't messed up my life. You're holding me back, Clara. Holding him back. The final poisonous insult. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the tile floor, a sound of grating finality. I walked toward the counter, my face a mask of perfect indifference. I picked up his blue glass, swirling the last centimeter of liquid. The experiment is over, Leo, I said, my voice low and metallic. I put the glass down. I told you I was a chemistry major. You called me brilliant, but you missed the simplest reaction of all. He watched me, his mind racing to catch up, the euphoria of the Veritas curdling into cold dread. Clara, what are you talking about? I walked to the table and leaned in, my hands flat on the wood. That cocktail, Leo? The Clara's cure? It wasn't a cocktail. It was a catalyst. A precise blend of psychoactive compounds I formulated and synthesized right here in my dorm room. I called it Veritas, the truth. And it worked. You just gave me a full, detailed, and undeniable confession, a complete molecular breakdown of your emotional infidelity, your calculated lies, and your physical betrayal with Emma. I watched the realizations spread across his face, the confusion, the denial, and then pure, animal terror. He tried to speak, but the words were stuck, choked by the realization of the trap. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't need the audio, but he needed to see it. The red icon of the voice recorder flashing brightly, confirming the digital capture of every single word. You recorded me, Clara? You can't. That's a violation. He stammered, his eyes wide with a desperate, self-pitying horror. Violation? I echoed, my voice rising in a sudden, sharp, terrible burst of released anger. You violated every promise, Leo. You violated my trust, my safety, my peace of mind. You called me a responsibility. I told you I don't have time to be played. I am a chemist, and you were a data point. The analysis is complete. The result is 0. The relationship is an irreversible failure, a complete decomposition. I reached over and snatched the keys to his car from the bowl on the table. You are in no condition to drive right now. The effects of the catalyst will wear off in about 3 to 4 hours. Until then, you will sit here and think about every lie you just confessed. You can call a cab in the morning. And don't bother texting me. The cord is cut. The safety net is gone. I walked to the door, my heart pounding a terrifying rhythm against my ribs. I had the truth, but the victory tasted like ash. I paused at the doorway, one last look at the boy, now a stranger, cowering in my chair. "And Leo," I added, my voice dangerously soft, "tell Emma she won the prize. She got the man who couldn't even manage a single semester of college, but she got him at a high price. A certified, recorded, and morally bankrupt liar." I slammed the door behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just walked, the keys tight in my hand, toward the only place I knew I could find cold, rational comfort: the empty, sterile silence of the university's advanced chemistry lab. I needed to wash the taste of Veritas out of my mouth. I needed to run a complex titration, an experiment with predictable results, to remind myself that some things in life still obeyed the laws of physics, and not the chaotic, deceitful whims of a weak boy. I had my closure. Now I needed my equilibrium. The fallout, the cleanup of the emotional debris would have to wait until I had finished my SN2 homework.
I didn't go to the advanced chemistry lab. I drove. The cool night air whipping through the cracked window of my old Honda was the only thing keeping the synthetic composure from dissolving. I had Leo's keys, but more importantly, I had the recording. A digital scar tissue documenting the entire, raw, chemically induced confession. It was proof. A bulletproof vest against the inevitable wave of doubt that would come with the morning light. I pulled into the nearest rest stop, the fluorescent glare of the gas station sign reflecting off the hood. I had to think. I had executed the perfect chemical interrogation, but the problem now was the fallout. Leo was still in my dorm room, stripped bare by the Veritas, alone, likely cycling through terror, shame, and a desperate, drug-induced exhaustion. I pulled out my phone and dialed Silas. The private investigator answered on the first ring, his voice as dry and sharp as steel wool. "Silas, Phase 1 is complete. I have the data. The subject confessed to the full scope of the emotional and physical infidelity with the coworker. It's recorded." A moment of silence crackled on the line. Silas was not a man easily surprised. "That's efficient, Miss Clark, and perhaps ethically questionable. Regardless, I'll need the audio. Send it to the encrypted drive I provided. Now, about the physical surveillance you canceled. Do you still require asset tracking on the coworker? Emma." I stared out at the passing highway lights. Leo was a known quantity now, a weak, self-pitying liar. But Emma, she was the architect of his deception, the predator who understood his insecurities perfectly. She was the complication. "Yes, Silas. Phase 2 is go. Forget Leo. I want Emma. I want a profile. Who is she? What is her endgame? Why is she playing a boy like Leo when she could clearly do better? Everyone has a motive, Miss Clark, even the ones who claim to be too complicated. Retainer adjusted. Phase 2 initiated. I will start with a deep dive into her digital footprint and public records. Expect the first report in 36 hours. I spent the rest of the night driving aimlessly, the audio file, Leo's confession, burning a hole in my cloud storage. I ended up 3 hours away, outside my Aunt Vivian's sprawling, silent estate. Vivian was a formidable woman, a CEO who viewed life as a hostile takeover. She answered the door in a silk robe, a martini in hand, and a look of profound, detached amusement. "Clara, darling, you look like you've been distilling poisons. Come in. Tell Aunt Viv what terrible scientific mess you've made." I told her everything. The Insta-follow, the shared music, the projection, the Veritas, the recording, the confession, the keys. I spoke in a monotone, the scientist recounting her experiment.
Vivian listened, sipping her martini, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she didn't express shock or moral judgment. She simply leaned back, a small, cold smile touching her lips. "My brilliant girl, you're a Clark, after all. You don't ask for the truth, you synthesize it. Now, you need to understand the psychology of the liar. Leo's confession was not an act of repentance, it was an act of ego. He was high on the drama, on his own perceived bad boy status, and chemically stripped of the anxiety of consequence. He thinks he's an anti-hero now, but the truth is, he's just a residue." She paused, looking directly into my eyes. "You created a controlled environment to isolate the truth. Now, you must maintain that control during the extraction process. You have the leverage, the recording. Use it to ensure a clean, silent break. No drama, no contact. He leaves you alone, or you send the audio to his family. Simple leverage." Aunt Vivian's cold pragmatism was exactly the antidote I needed. I stayed at her estate, sleeping for only 3 hours, then driving back to campus early Saturday morning, Leo's car keys heavy in my pocket. When I reached my dorm room, the door was unlocked, and the sight inside was exactly as I had left it, but subtly different. Leo was gone. The note was on the table, tucked under a glass. It was scrawled, messy, barely legible. "Clara, I am so sorry. I didn't mean any of it. I don't know what came over me. I think I had a bad reaction to the alcohol. I felt sick and confused. It was the drink. You twisted my words. I love you. Please call me. The way you looked at me, you're terrifying. You're the one who needs help. I took a cab. I need my keys. L." The denial. Predictable, immediate, and utterly pathetic. He was already rewriting the narrative, blaming the drink, the stress, me. He had already discarded the truth because the shame of it was too heavy.
I smirked, a hollow, bitter expression. He didn't deny the content of the confession, the Emma part, the kissing part, the projection, only the validity of the method and the emotional intent. He had to be the victim, the confused boy led astray by both Emma and the manipulative, terrifying chemist girlfriend. I texted him one word: recording. He responded instantly, a flurry of panicked messages. "Clara, stop, don't, please, I'll explain, we can talk. Give me the keys, I'll do anything, please." I blocked his number. The emotional extraction was complete. The leverage was established. I then returned to my life, walking into my organic chemistry final on Monday morning, passing the test with a clean 92, the structure of the SN reaction mechanism clear and predictable in my mind. The human heart, however, remained an unpredictable, volatile solvent. 36 hours later, the report from Silas arrived. It was dense, clinical, and chilling. Subject: Emma Reynolds. Age: 19. Occupation: barista/online graphic design student. The facts were mundane, but the subtext was a psychological thriller. Emma wasn't some desperate siren. She was an artist of psychological manipulation. Digital footprint. Emma's social media was highly curated. She positioned herself as a free spirit, an old soul, constantly battling the mundane modern world. She had a history of intense, brief relationships with emotionally fragile men. Her ex-boyfriend, mentioned by Leo, was a musician whose career she had supposedly inspired before abruptly dropping him when his popularity grew. M.O.,
modus operandi. Silas noted a pattern. Emma targeted young men who were intellectually capable but professionally paralyzed, men who were stuck. Leo, who blew his college savings and felt trapped, was textbook. She didn't want a long-term relationship. She wanted to be the catalyst for their major life change, the muse, the dramatic interlude that they would credit for their eventual success or failure. She needed to feel powerful by holding the leash. The demand for him to cut the cord with me wasn't about integrity. It was about ensuring maximum psychological drama and confirming her own power. Current status, the most chilling detail. Emma was actively engaging with another subject, a 24-year-old manager at a local bookstore who was also going through a difficult, long-distance relationship. Silas suspected she was already lining up her next project. Leo was becoming yesterday's news. Silas's summary was brutal. Miss Reynolds is a serial psychological predator. She feeds on the emotional weakness and stagnant potential of others. Subject Leo served his purpose as a narcissistic supply source to confirm her power and artistry. He is currently in the discard phase. Leo was already discarded. The thought was simultaneously painful and liberating. I hadn't lost him to a passionate rival. I had lost him to a brief, cruel ego boost for a serial manipulator. I realized then that my work wasn't finished. I didn't need revenge against Leo. He was already punishing himself with shame and denial. But Emma? Emma needed to be exposed. She was a chemical contaminant in the lives of emotionally vulnerable men. I had the means, and I had the motive. I was a chemist, and I was going to neutralize the contaminant. I drove back to my hometown, 3 hours south, arriving on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't text Leo. I didn't call. I went straight to the coffee shop where he worked. I sat in the corner, nursing a large, overly sweet latte. The air was thick with the scent of roasted beans and false cheer. There she was, Emma. She was everything Leo had described, a little too artsy, a little too intense, wearing a vintage flannel shirt and an expression of profound, studied boredom. She was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, dramatic, dangerous, and likely to destroy things. Leo was there too. He looked terrible. His eyes were shadowed, his posture slumped. He avoided my gaze, flinching when I made eye contact. He looked like a puppy who had been kicked or chemically interrogated. Emma saw me immediately. She approached my table, not with defensiveness, but with a calculated, cool curiosity, a slight, predating smile playing on her lips. She recognized me instantly, the girlfriend from the photos, the name Leo was supposed to untangle himself from.
Hi, can I get you anything else? Her voice was smooth, confident, dripping with false concern. I looked up at her, my eyes cold and steady. No, thank you, Emma. I'm just waiting for a friend. You must be Emma. Leo's been talking about you. Oh, really? She raised a delicate eyebrow, leaning closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. I mean, we're coworkers. We share a lot of late shifts. He's been going through a really tough time, with the distance and, well, everything. She emphasized everything, a subtle nod to the fact that she was the secret keeper, the one who truly understood him. I know he has, I agreed, my smile thin and brittle. He told me everything, Emma. Every single detail.
The secret Instagram, the tortured poet act, the shared music, the deep talks about how I'm just his responsibility, and of course the little kiss after the late shift. Her composure fractured for a split second, a micro-expression of shock and calculated fury, but she recovered instantly, leaning even closer, lowering her voice, making the whole exchange feel illicit. Look, Clara, I told Leo he needed to be honest with you. He's a good guy, but he's weak. He needs to figure himself out. I'm not here to break up your relationship. I'm just here to be a mirror. He saw his own potential in me. That's all. I told him I'm not interested in complicated messes. You should be thanking me, honestly. I forced his hand. Her ego was a gaping weakness. She thought she was untouchable, the moral compass forcing the breakup. A mirror. That's a lovely way to put it, I said, opening my purse. I pulled out my phone and held it up, showing her the illuminated title on the screen, Leo's Confession. Or you could say I used a chemical compound, a truth serum, to force his confession. Which, Emma, he delivered perfectly. Every word about you being the challenge and me being the responsibility. Every time you manipulated him into feeling justified in his lies. It's all here, digitally archived. And just so you know, I also have a deep dive profile on you, provided by a private investigator. Your pattern, your ex-boyfriends, your need to be the dramatic muse who causes the fallout, it's all mapped out. Her face went pale, the color drained out from underneath her vintage eyeliner. The realization that she was no longer in control, that her actions had been clinically dissected and recorded, hit her like a chemical burn. You synthesized a truth serum. You're insane. You're crazy. She stammered, backing up a step, her voice losing its cool, predatory edge. No, Emma, I'm a chemist, and you, my dear, are a contaminant. You thrive on the emotional stagnation of weak men. But I am not weak, and Leo is no longer my problem. However, your next victim, the poor manager at the bookstore, he will be. And I can assure you, Emma, if I ever hear of you engaging in this mirror act with another emotionally vulnerable man, this recording and the full profile of your manipulative MO goes straight to social media. Not just a vague post, but a detailed chemical breakdown of your personality. I finished my latte, the artificial sweetness suddenly tasting like victory. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to drop off Leo's keys and then get back to my molecular work. Unlike some people, I actually have a future to build. I left the coffee shop, a chilling sense of control washing over me. I walked past the counter. Leo was frozen, staring at Emma's terrified face, finally understanding the scope of what he had lost. I dropped his keys onto the counter with a quiet clink. I didn't look at him. I didn't say a word. I just walked out the door and into the bright sunlight. I had exposed the lie, neutralized the threat, and surgically removed the relationship. I was free. But as I drove away, the victory felt tainted. The Veritas had extracted the truth, but it had also extracted a piece of my own innocence. I was no longer the naive, trusting girlfriend. I was Clara, the chemist who knew how to find the truth, no matter the ethical cost. And that thought, that new, hard-edged identity, was far more terrifying than Leo's betrayal. The residue of deception clung to me, a lingering scent of cynicism and the sharp, metallic tang of the truth. I was free, yes, but I was irrevocably changed. The drive back to the university was silent, a vast, echoing emptiness where the noise of betrayal used to be. The silence wasn't peace, it was the quiet of a vacuum. I had achieved the most direct, chemically perfect outcome, truth, control, and closure. But the emotional byproducts were complex and toxic. I was free of Leo's lies, but I was now haunted by my own ruthless efficiency. I was Clara, the chemist who used her knowledge as a weapon. The final confrontation with Emma had been a masterpiece of strategic intimidation. Her face, stripped of its calculated artistry, contorted in fear as I laid out the facts. The Veritas, the recording, and the private investigator's detailed profile of her narcissistic MO. I hadn't just broken up a relationship, I had dismantled her self-image as the untouchable muse. I had shown her that her manipulation was not art, it was a predictable, solvable equation. I returned to my dorm room, the space feeling vast and strangely clean without the shadow of Leo's neediness. Sarah, my roommate, was on her bed, scrolling through TikTok, oblivious to the high-stakes psychological warfare I had just concluded. I immediately uploaded the full audio file, Leo's confession, to the encrypted drive Silas had provided. I wasn't going to use it unless Leo violated the terms of our unspoken separation. Absolute, immediate, and permanent no contact. But I needed a professional to hold the evidence. Silas sent an immediate short confirmation text. File secured. Excellent fidelity. Now, Miss Clark, you have the closure. The subject, Leo, is neutralized. Subject, Emma, is destabilized. My file is closed. Neutralized. The word resonated with the cold, scientific language I now seemed to inhabit. Over the next few weeks, the consequences of my actions unfolded like a series of slow-motion chemical reactions. Leo's final taint. Leo tried twice more to contact me. The first attempt was a long, rambling email, a desperate, pitiful plea for forgiveness. He blamed the Veritas again, calling it an assault, an illegal act, but then pivoted, admitting he was confused and scared, and he truly did love me. He didn't ask for the keys, he asked for me. He said he had ended things with Emma, that the sight of her terrified face in the coffee shop, juxtaposed with my cold scientific fury, had made him realize he was being played by both of us. He ended the email by saying he was moving back in with his parents and finally enrolling in the local community college. He was trying to frame his breakdown as a catalyst for change. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the entire email chain, along with his first denial text, to Silas. Silas's response was a single curt email titled, "Contingency." The implication was clear. If Leo contacted me one more time, the recording would find its way to someone very public, very fast. The contact attempts stopped immediately. I didn't see Leo again, but I heard from Mark, his best friend. Mark was bewildered and furious. "Leo says you spiked his drink, Clara. He says you went full psycho and trapped him. What the hell is wrong with you? Tell Leo to listen to the recording, Mark, and tell him to worry less about my actions and more about his own integrity." Mark never replied. My reputation in my hometown was officially poisoned, labeled with the stigma of the crazy, terrifying chemist girlfriend. But my integrity was intact, and that was the only metric that mattered now. Emma's destabilization. Silas's profile had been accurate. Emma was moving on. But my confrontation had worked. I hadn't just scared her, I had fundamentally challenged her control narrative. A few weeks later, I heard through Mark's extended social circle that Emma had abruptly quit the coffee shop. She had been publicly accused of manipulation and dishonesty by the bookstore manager, her intended next victim, who had clearly been tipped off, likely by a subtle anonymous warning I sent, using carefully chosen phrases directly from Silas's profile. Emma's carefully curated Instagram aesthetic shifted from tortured muse to victim of toxic gossip, but the engagement dropped. Her power was in secrecy and the illusion of untouchability. I had shattered both. She was forced to find a new town, a new scene, and a new strategy. She was neutralized, but the cost was a deep-seated cynicism in my own heart. Clara's new identity. The most profound change was in me. I was no longer the girl who was scared to lose her boyfriend. I was the girl who chose truth over comfort, control over chaos. The Veritas had been a powerful, amoral tool, and I couldn't unknow the moral line I had crossed. I became obsessive about control. My chemistry studies intensified. If the unpredictable human heart was chaos, the lab was order. I spent every spare moment in the advanced chemistry facilities, working on projects with predictable, clean outcomes. I specialized in analytical chemistry, the process of determining the composition of unknown substances. I looked at the world as a complex mixture of reagents, and my goal was to break everything down into its quantifiable, measurable components. No more unknowns. My relationships cooled. I distanced myself from Sarah, my roommate, worried she might see the icy core I had exposed. I talked to Aunt Vivian constantly. She had become my confidant, a reflection of the pragmatic, cold logic I had adopted. "You had to choose, Clara," Vivian said during one late-night call. "Be the victim of a simple deception or be the architect of a complex truth. You chose the harder, cleaner path. Now live with the power you created. Never apologize for demanding clarity." But the truth wasn't always clean. Sometimes, late at night, when the sterile light of the lab reflected off the glassware, I would look at my reflection and see a stranger. My eyes were sharper, harder. My smile was rarer. The innocence Leo had cherished, the naivete he had taken for granted, was gone, burned away in the chemical fire of the Veritas experiment. I had been forced to face a terrible conclusion. If I, the faithful, heartbroken girlfriend, could synthesize a chemical weapon and use it against the man I loved, then anyone was capable of anything. The world was not divided into good guys and bad guys. It was divided into people who had crossed the line and people who hadn't been pushed hard enough yet. I was now standing firmly on the wrong side of that line, and the moral ambiguity was the hardest thing to metabolize. I had won, but I was also fundamentally corrupted by the victory. The relationship with Leo, the innocent love story, had ended not with a whimper, but with a calculated, synthesized bang. It was a dark, private footnote in my academic career, my first successful, unsanctioned experiment. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting the image of my own face, the face of a highly capable, permanently cynical woman who knew the composition of human deception better than the composition of any molecule. The old Clara was gone. The new Clara was a survivor, a formidable mind, and a woman who would never be played again. She was a chemist first, and a human second. And that, I realized with a final, chilling sense of certainty, was the true cost of the truth. I had the clarity I craved, but I had traded my softness for steel. The reaction was complete, and the product was irreversible. The residue of deception was not Leo or Emma. It was the cold, hard cynicism now settled in my own heart.